VikesNow. I am Dustin Baker. We are on July 25th, and training camp started, sorta, Sunday with rookies reporting, and everybody else shows up this week. So we are back in the thick of things. I think I always kind of, as I talk myself through the beginning of the show, I always wonder if you guys are maniacs about the Vikings, obsessed with it like I am. Probably so if you watch the show. And if so, yesterday was a big damn day for the Vikings. It was the most eventful roster day since the NFL draft, bar none. A lot of stuff happened, so that's why we're doing this particular theme today, to unpack all of the items that happened on Monday. So we shall start from there, and I will just go down the list in no particular order to get you caught up to speed. The first item was an undrafted wide receiver from Kansas State, Malik Knowles, was cut or waived with an injury designation. What does that mean? Well, that means something is the matter with him. For some reason, during the summer, the training camp, they don't really have to disclose what happened to the person. They just toss him on a PUP list or NFI list, which we'll get to here for a couple other dudes, and that's that. So Malik Knowles will hit the waiver wire. 31 other teams can try to pluck him if they want to, and if not, he'll probably revert back to the Vikings and go on some sort of injured list for who knows how long. But why should you care about this guy? Well, we had a large undrafted free agent class, and he was one of the big names of the little fish in the big pond. I think Vikings wire Tyler Forness had him making his 53-man roster, and that kind of falls by the wayside. And our very own Kyle Jodry from Purple PTSD and Vikings territory, one of his bold predictions for training camp is that some unsung wide receiver stood out, and for him, that was going to be Knowles. So a lot of smart folks were high on this gentleman, and it appears that it's going to not work out. Or if it does, it was a weird thing to waive him just to bring him back. But Malik Knowles, who a lot of you thought was a promising WR5 capable type, probably isn't going to make the roster. So I'll rework those if you keep tabs of those at home like a weirdo like I do. Malik Knowles isn't on the Vikings anymore, or if he is and will be, it will probably be with some sort of injury attached. And again, in no particular order, the next one is Chris Reed to the NFI list, non-football injury list. That means something happened to him relatively recently. And this one might be one of the most noteworthy on the list because he is the Vikings reservist option at guard. For example, training camp sometime this week, Ed Ingram breaks his leg or Ezra Cleveland breaks his thumb. Chris Reed, in theory, would be the next man up. He is a journeyman veteran who looked pretty decent last year once he gained his footing in reservist duty. He, like Malik Knowles, something's the matter with him, and we don't know what. He could be back tomorrow. He could miss all of 2023. But this, I've written on Vikings territory, if you guys and gals read any of this stuff, that until yesterday, the Vikings didn't have very many offensive guards compared to the rest of the NFL. Usually at this time on the calendar, they should have about 6, 7, and the Vikings had, about 4 or 5. It appears that they've converted Oli Udoh back to guard. At least that's what their depth chart said, the Vikings' own depth chart. That didn't really work out great in 2021, but what do I know? So Oli Udoh would, in theory, be the next man up if something happened to Ingram or Cleveland because Chris Reed is mysteriously on the NFI list. It's also a roundabout way of saying if the Vikings want to get richer at guard and get somebody who's not some anonymous person, Dalton Risner and now Andrew Norwell, who was released yesterday by the Commanders. There's 2 really good guards that pass protect well. Dalton Risner, Andrew Norwell, both free agents. Their acumen, their skill set is pass blocking instead of run blocking, or at least they're better at pass protection. And last time we all checked, Kirk Cousins was the most hit quarterback in the league last year. So Chris Reed, tentatively out. We don't know how long. Could be a day, could be a year. They should start to explore, like I've said 100 times this offseason, Dalton Risner, who has ties to offensive line coach Chris Cooper, or now Andrew Norwell of Washington Commanders fame in 2022. Also was an All-Pro in 2017 for the Carolina Panthers. Go get a guard. You heard it here first, the recommendation. Speaking of guards, to get a little deeper after the NFI listing for Chris Reed is Jack Snyder. He was an undrafted specimen last year from San Jose State. Ended up with the Rams for a little bit and then on to the XFL. I think he was drafted in XFL's little draft, but now he's a Minnesota Viking, and he will live on the 90-man roster. Probably not make the 53-manner, maybe the practice squad, but with Chris Reed down, who knows? Any one of these guys, whether it's just some guy like Jackie Chin, the tackle, or Malik Knowles before yesterday, could spring up and make the 53-man roster. So keep an eye on not the Watchman Zach Snyder, Jack Snyder, who is now a Minnesota Viking and an offensive guard. That was another bit of news that hit yesterday. Also, there's about 5 more things. Andre Carter, everybody's favorite UDFA edge rusher from Army, made the freak list from Bruce Feldman. He hits the physically unable to perform list, the PUP list. And the reason that's noteworthy is because folks had big plans for this guy, at least to make the 53-man roster. He's the one that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah flung $300,000 at, which is a lot of money for an undrafted free agent. So just like Reed, just like Malik Knowles, the nature of the injury is mysterious. He's on the PUP list, could come off today, could be on there for several months. But this one is also interesting because we still have an unsettled Danielle Hunter contract situation. And in theory, if Andre Carter really was a draft snub, he could have received some semblance of playing time in 2023 if you have a lackluster edge rusher room. And there's still no word on Hunter. It's actually very radio silent, too quiet. But at least for a while, a lot of folks' big UDFA splash, almost every Vikings pundit like myself has Andre Carter making the 53-man roster. But for now, he'll live on the PUP list. The Vikings also signed tight end Colin Thompson from Carolina Panthers lore. He's been around since, I think it's 2017, and he's going to enter, his 7th NFL season. He's a long snapper and a tight end. He scored 1 touchdown, 1 reception in his career, and right now he'll be added to the tight end mix with TJ Hawkinson, Josh Oliver, Johnny Munt, Nick Muse, and Ben Sims, not Ben Simmons. And so that means Colin Thompson is the 6th tight end. Probably won't make the roster, maybe so if he can edge Johnny Munt out of the way. But he was a depth signing, and I think he kicked off the festivities yesterday after the Vikings had released Dalvin Cook on June 9th and then John Reed last week. They had 2 open roster spots, and so Colin Thompson was the first one. So he should be a fringe bubble guy to possibly make the roster if he can beat out Johnny Munt. He's also quite funny. I don't know if you're on Twitter. The Vikings announced the acquisition, and he did the Who Snoop Dogg meme poking fun at his own anonymity. So the Vikings have a 6th tight end named Colin Thompson. And then in other news, these aren't specifically pertaining to the Vikings roster. Teddy Bridgewater tried out for the Detroit Lions. Yes, the darling Detroit Lions that everybody thinks are somehow is going to win the NFC North instead of the Vikings. I will say this over and over until we get going in the regular season. It is so bizarre that you and me have yearned for Aaron Rodgers to get the hell out of the way since, when did he get really good? 2009, I guess 2008 he started to look good. And then the year that he finally departs, you look up and it's not the Vikings that are there to seize the day. It's the Detroit Lions, who are everybody's favorite sports books, pundits. Everybody thinks the Lions, besides me and you, are going to win the division. So it's really strange that the Vikings are playing second fiddle to the Lions, and don't look now. Teddy Bridgewater could eventually end up there if that tryout went well. They have Nate Sudfeld as a backup to Jared Goff and also Hendon Hooker. But like some of the dudes I've already mentioned, Hendon Hooker is on one of those injury lists, so who knows when he'll get to sniff QB2 responsibilities. But before the regular season begins, your old favorite quarterback of the future, Teddy Bridgewater, could play for the Detroit Lions. At least there was an audition for the relationship. In other news, rounding out the show, Marcus Peters is no longer the best cornerback on the market. He went to the Las Vegas Raiders, which is also where Duke Shelley ended up. So everything we've asked the Vikings to do in the last 4 months, re-sign Duke Shelley for the love of God, because the guy was a baller. And if you're not going to do that, then you have to explore somebody like Marcus Peters. Well, the Raiders went and got both of them. So their front office evidently knows how to read our minds. But now, if we get to the training camp, the real happenings in the cornerback CB room doesn't look promising. You got Byron Murphy, Andrew Booth, Caleb Evans, Jawan Williams, and Mekhi Blackman. If those guys don't really look the part, then your options are dwindling. You can do Eli Apple, you can do Anthony Brown, William Jackson, but we are down to slim pickings at CB, especially because Marcus Peters, 30 years old? He is now a Raider. And then finally, we had the dog revelation. Jordan Addison was popped Thursday morning for going 85 miles over the speed limit. Was it right outside of St. Paul? The court of a public opinion immediately was like, what are we doing? It was a large red flag for a rookie who hasn't even seen training camp yet. And yeah, I guess he apologized and started to begin his reclamation for his reputation spiel. Well, it came out yesterday that he was trying to tend to his sick dog. At first, I thought he was driving with the dog in the Lamborghini, but now it appears that was what he told the police officers was, my dog is sick at home. So this comes down to whether or not you believe that's true. If you're a dog lover, you know that there's very little separation between your ardor for, your dogs and your children. So if he's telling the truth, going 140 miles per hour in a major city to save your dog, still a little reckless, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Or it could be bullshit. He could be making it up and his dog ate his homework, or in this case, his dog was sick and that wasn't true. There's no way to know. I don't know if that's true or not, but I will say this. If indeed he was trying to rectify an awful situation for his dog, I don't know if I would go 140 miles an hour, but I certainly wouldn't go the speed limit, and I think true dog owners hopefully agree with me. So yeah, I think, but at the very least, for Addison, he wasn't intoxicated at 3 a.m. that evening, and he didn't hurt anybody, so he has a pathway to repair his reputation, whether or not it was for a sick dog or he just thought he was some sort of NASCAR driver. Who knows? All right, to recap, Malik Knowles, no longer a Viking, or if he does come back, he's probably hitting an injury list. Chris Reed is on the non-football injury list indefinitely. Jack Snyder, free agent guard, joined. Oh, I forgot to mention Bobby Evans. I don't know how that wasn't on my list. Bobby Evans, a tackle who spent a little bit of time on the practice squad, a Kevin O'Connell guy from the 2021 Super Bowl winning Rams. He's back as well. He gets the roster up to 90 or 91 players if you count the international player, Junior Aho. But yeah, Bobby Evans is back. He had a 29.8 grade PFF last year. Not very inspiring at all. If that would have qualified for a minimum snap count, it would have been the worst tackle in football. But Bobby Evans is back. Who knows if he'll make the roster. Jack Snyder, not Zach Snyder, guard. He was signed. Andre Carter II to the PUP list. Yay. Colin Thompson, tight end. He is the new TE6, and if he plays his cards right, he can be the TE3. Teddy Bridgewater, for some godforsaken reason, is auditioning with the Lions. Marcus Peters is off the board. He ain't going to be a Viking, so if they want a CB who's a veteran, it's got to be Eli Apple, Anthony Brown, or William Jackson, because otherwise it's going to be some anonymous person you've never heard of. And then Jordan Addison was allegedly speeding to accommodate a sickly dog. That's everything for the Vikings Wild Monday, and it was really only wild because there was a lot of shit that happened. All right, I have 3 wisdom teeth coming out this week, and I'm not sure. I haven't had one out since I was, 26 years old, and it wasn't that bad back then. I was also an active alcoholic at the time, so I just drank away any type of pain. Now I'm having 3 out with a completely sober mind, so I don't know if I will be recording this show until Friday. If I am, good for me. That means all is peachy. Otherwise, we'll talk to you guys and gals Friday. Skol, baby.